Latest edition of Sign or Decline. Landry Locker of the Locker Room, Cody Stoots of the Cody Stoots channel, and Houston Football. Be sure to get that subscription in. It's the best type of beat writing that you could possibly get. Screw the Athletic. They don't even cover the Texans. So Gabe Davis, this is an interesting one. We've been talking a lot about big names. Texans are on the market for big names, at least according to betting odds. They're top 3 in odds for Josh Jacobs. They're near the top for Saquon Barkley. They're at the top when it comes to Mike Evans. Gabe Davis is a name that hasn't really come up as much, but you're looking at a guy who is battle-tested, 4 years of high-level football, really kind of a deep threat, played opposite of obviously a number one receiver in Stephon Diggs, creeping up, 24, 25 years old, perhaps some unrealized potential. Where do we sit on Gabe Davis? Spot Rack has the estimated value, which is what we always go off of as a starting point, because I feel like when people are talking about sign a guy or not, they get lost in the sticks of how much. You can still have that, but just use this as the starting point. 4 years, $54 million is what Spot Rack has the estimation at for Gabe Davis.
Look, this is a big play wide receiver, and you talked about the battle tested. He's got one of the best playoff performances by a wide receiver ever. I mean, the big loss to Kansas City in the shootout between the Bills and the Chiefs a couple of years ago, he had 200 yards in that game. He was one of the best players on the field in that moment, and he's a skilled and talented guy that can get deep. And you mentioned it. He's played a lot of important, meaningful football. And it's worth noting that guys that produce in meaningful football for playoff teams, I trust them more than guys who go out there and dominate in the fourth quarter when their team is getting blown out by 25 points. I just trust those guys more. And Gabe Davis is certainly one of the more interesting case studies when it comes to free agency, because he's not got a bunch of eye-popping stats, but you're betting on potential to an extent. At the same time, this is a guy that was a mid-round pick that is probably leaving Buffalo based on his social media post from this week, and he's going to want
be a wasted 8 minutes if he's not.
Yeah, right. He's going to want to be taken care of financially. You put up the Spot Rack projection and the idea there, and certainly that's a nice little investment for a guy like Gabe Davis, who's never had a 1,000-yard receiving season.
Yeah, and normally this is like when we make the case for Gabe Davis, like you and I, we pride ourselves in being research guys and, talking points and following the team. Well, in that 8-minute video that he put out, he kind of made the case for himself. Let's look at his stats presentation here and just look at some of these numbers. Some of them will make you roll your eyes. Some of them will make you raise your eyebrows. But this was the Gabe Davis stat presentation that he put on Twitter, and there's plenty of this. He put out the post, and then he put this out. This is from 2020 to 2023. He's first in the NFL with the 78.9% first down rate, first in the NFL with the 17.8% touchdown rate, first in the NFL with 16.3 yards average depth of target, whatever the hell that means. First in the NFL, 17.3 yards per reception. First in the NFL, 45.4 explosive reception rate. 10th in the NFL, 33 touchdowns. However, he mentions on 336 targets and then puts the average of the other targets. 47th in the NFL in target rate. So he's throwing that out there. Then he goes from 2020 to 2022, most TDs ever in first 3 seasons for a day 3 drafted wide receiver past Tyreek Hill. Feel like we're kind of reaching here.
There's more.
Then he goes to 2020, 2022, first in the NFL, 56.8% of receptions for first downs or touchdowns. First in the NFL, every 3.5 catches are touchdowns. First in the NFL, 21.5 yards per reception. And then 6th in the NFL, 2.53 yards per route run. There's more than that. And then he has wide receivers averaging 800 plus receiving yards, 8 TDs, and 17 games per season from 2020 to 2023. He has CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, and then himself. And he's also putting their targets on there. So an interesting layout by him. Some of those stats
I don't care about.
Some of them are reaches.
Yeah.
I like just reading between the lines for me, the question that I do have is, when you start throwing in targets, does that mean that perhaps he wants an opportunity to go somewhere where he can be a number one guy? In other words, like would going to New York and reuniting with Brian Dable or something like that be more appealing to him than coming to a situation like Houston where you got, whatever you say, you got Nico, you got Tank Dell. So those targets, and assuming that the Texans get the running back, they're not going to be there, or is he just doing that to show the effectiveness? That would be my question for Gabe Davis. But when you're sprinkling in the target share and stuff, you wonder, okay, does that mean that he wants to go somewhere where he can be the man?
Hey, I tell you what, if Gabe Davis is your third wide receiver, that's a really good wide receiver. That's one of the best third wide receivers you could have in all of football. He's been a little bit disappointing as the number 2 for Buffalo. They've been trying to add some sort of, jolt to that offense while he's been the number 2 wide receiver. He never quite ascended to the level that those stats would make you think that he is.
His
that type of guy.
Is a one-trick pony kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, can he take the top off of defense? Can he get deep? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely he can. I just don't know that he does it on a consistent enough basis that you feel great about it. I think really the case against Gabe Davis is, you laid it out, he may be wanting the football too much, and I'm not throwing the ball to Gabe Davis instead of Nico Collins or Tank Dell. That would be silly. Like, I'm not going to force the ball to Gabe Davis, and we put the projection in there. He didn't put all those stats up to make $13 million a year. He put all those stats up to go out there and try to get one of those massive overpays that we see at the wide receiver spot in free agency sometimes. Man, just hearing all that, reading all that, and you start thinking about, well, what he actually was for the Bills and some of the unhappiness they had. Tell me that this doesn't feel like a free agent bust written all over it. I mean,
between this and the arguing with the fans and the 8-minute video and then the stats, it seems a little bit interesting. I like Gabe Davis. I think there could be some unrealized potential. There seems to be a little bit extra. There seems to be a little bit more. This is Kenny
Golladay. Some team's going to pay him be the number 1 wide receiver, and he's not going to be near good enough to be the number 1 wide receiver. It's Kenny Golladay all over again.
Okay, so do you have a case for, or have we already established where you sit here?
I think you've got a pretty good idea of where I am on Gabe Davis. I before we did this video, there are at least 13 rookie wide receivers that I like better than Gabe Davis. At least. So I think you got pretty
money and stuff like that. My thing is this, for the Texans, I like the idea of Mike Evans. I like the idea of bringing in other receivers. I like adding some depth, but with the way this draft is laid out, it's much like last year with the tight end market. Like, there's a chance Dalton Schultz gets a better offer this year than he did last year, simply because last year the draft was stacked with tight ends, specifically if you're drafting on the back end of the first round or in day 2. I feel like that's where the receivers are right now this year. So when you're talking about, it's one thing to say we're going to pay Mike Evans $20 million and he's a Hall of Fame caliber receiver. He's a Hall of Fame caliber guy. You know what you're getting from him. But if you're going to, pay above what a receiver has actually produced, regardless of how impressive some of those stats were, that's where you kind of wonder, like, is it really worth it? Or should we wait for a Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy type on day 2 or some of these other guys? And that's the issue with the Gabe Davis thing.
Hey, if that's what a day 3 guy can do, then I'll take a day 3 guy, Gabe Davis. You kind of hurting your own case there.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Gabe Davis thing. I do think that the Texans need to add like kind of a gadgety guy on the back end, like maybe a little bit more explosiveness, because I think that's one of their problems. I think Nico Collins and Tank Dell, they can be like top 3 receivers on productive football teams. But I think there needs to be a little bit more explosiveness. We know Bobby Slowick likes to run reverses. There's just not a lot of that with like the John Mechie's or the Xavier Hutchinsons. So I'm even looking at what happened today where Nelson Aguilar signed with the Ravens. It seems like Devin Duvernay has kind of been squeezed out of their offense. I think if you take a guy who's been a 2-time all-pro caliber punt returner and you give him more offensive opportunities for explosiveness, gadget plays and stuff like that, that's not going to be that expensive. So that's kind of where I'm shopping. The Gabe Davis thing, if the Texans were receiver desperate, maybe, but my verdict is going to be no. But I do respect his game, and I do respect that there's unrealized potential. There does seem to be a lot of extra stuff there that kind of makes you raise the eyebrows. Go ahead.
I was probably a little bit lukewarm until I saw this PowerPoint presentation by Gabe Davis, and that really turned me off on him. I mean, no, thank you. And you talking about, a speed guy? The NFL's littered with speed guys that don't make 13 or 14 or $15 million a year. So let Bobby Slowick and company grab one of those guys. You brought up Duvernay. That's a perfect example of that type of guy. Or go get one of those guys on day 3, because apparently day 3 guys can blow up, like Gabe Davis just showed us.
Yeah, and I mean it's one thing to say I'm not getting these opportunities because of this, but hey, sometimes having Stephon Diggs on the opposite side can help you out and help you have the opportunity to do what he did. So the verdict on Gabe Davis from us is a no. What say you? Should the Texans sign Gabe Davis? Be sure to subscribe to this channel, subscribe to Stoots' channel, and keep it locked. The offseason's intensifying. There's a lot of good stuff going on with the Texans, and the content don't stop. Appreciate you for coming through. Sign or decline Gabe Davis edition.